Mets are off to a hot start in 2025. Joining me now is our Mets expert, Gabrielle Raucci. Gab, good to see you again, and I know you must be so excited.
Yes, it's been an exciting 2 weeks of baseball so far. The Mets are playing extremely well, and I think there's a lot to talk about.
Well, let's hope they keep going for the rest of this season. Let's start with their pitching, which has been unbelievable so far. And specifically, Mets fans are excited to see a healthy Kodai Senga, who's fully healthy, living up to the hype, and off to a really hot start, even though it was an up and down series against the Athletics.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially coming off of a seven scoreless outing yesterday, he pitched. Ironically, in his three starts this season so far, he's pitched 77 pitches. So 77-7. I know pitchers are creatures of habits, and we're all superstitious when it comes to baseball. So that was an interesting tidbit there. But for him to essentially, coming off of this slow ramp up with spring training to go and push seven and be scoreless nonetheless is something really promising for Senga. Um, and not for nothing, he's demonstrating ace level stuff. I mean, we haven't seen this kind of outing, especially with injury and all of that, considering. But for him to come off of such a slow, kind of rocky first inning, I'm gonna say that in a nice way here. The first inning for Kodai Senga, the past three starts for him have not been great. They haven't been on par with what we know him to be. But for him to be kind of, really locating and finding things well and keeping his velo up, he's constantly walking around, making sure his mechanics are right. He's a perfectionist. So for him to have an outing like he did, extremely promising for him. I believe he flashed all seven of his pitches yesterday, which is big as well. Um, but not for nothing, right? I mean, this Mets pitching staff, especially Senga with his outing yesterday, they've seen, if it's not getting them on a whiff, it's more or less grounding out. So the ground ball rate for this, I want to say I looked at it this morning, maybe 50% the ground ball rate for this pitching staff, and especially with this elite defense behind them. I'm going to shout out Brett Beatty here. I know we're going to talk about him in a little bit, but for Kodai Senga to kind of maybe dial it back in those jams where maybe he's got to throw like a two ball or something, and for the defense to step up, especially turning double plays, 5-4-3 double plays nonetheless with Beatty in the hot corner yesterday. Really getting him out of those jams for him to be able to go the distance and really continue to work on getting back up to that 2023 200 plus strikeout Kodai Senga ace level stuff that we've seen and we're hoping to see for 2025.
Likewise. So, speaking of hot starts, maybe having to wait for Pete Alonso wasn't such a bad thing because as of now, he's showing he was worth that wait. He's been hitting for power, but he's also got the average going for him despite going 0 for 4 yesterday.
Yeah, Pete Alonso has been, I mean, for somebody who just loves the Mets and for all of the things that they stand for Pete to have gone and test free agency and for him to come back to the Mets. And not only that, I mean, with him, Lindor, and Soto at the front end of this lineup, for the three of them to be on base machines on top of just general expected power from all of them. One thing I've seen from Pete that a lot of Mets people, if you will, are talking about are this kind of refined plate appearances. He's got this ramped up, really dialed in like plate discipline um, that he's really not he's not chasing those low and away breaking ball pitches that we've seen him get out on in recent years where let's say people who think hitting 30 plus home runs is considered a slump or an off year. But we have seen him chase, and in those times that maybe he had, I don't want to say not gotten on base, but not really working counts as deep as he's been in the most recent of years. He's really showcasing. I mean, a 2019, his rookie season when he broke that rookie home run record. Every single, I think he hit a home run in his first 10 games, if I'm not mistaken there. Um, but really, he's on track to surpass the Darryl Strawberry Mets all-time home run record. And I was listening to a podcast this morning. I think it's the Mets official podcast, the Meet at the Apple. They were talking about the influence that Juan Soto must have had on Pete Alonso. Juan Soto was the big fish this offseason for the Mets, uh, supplemental to Pete Alonso, of course. But that kind of refined plate discipline, the ability to work deep counts and to really get on base, whether it's a walk or, if it's an extra base hit, you know, home runs aside, because we've already know that that's been locked down for Pete for years. Um, the influence that Juan Soto, who is a just really incredible, I mean, he could replace the ABS system they were using in spring training, right? He sees pitches and he works counts like no other. Um, it's obviously influenced Pete. And I think it's influenced a lot of guys in this lineup. I mean, this is a guy that they're talking to every single day. And not for nothing, Juan Soto, the topic of the offseason was who's going to protect him in the lineup. And Pete Alonso is surpassing all expectations. And he's really driving Soto in. It's kind of the opposite, I guess, effect here. Pete Alonso looks like Juan Soto in the box. And, that kind of intelligence and approach to things in the batter's box and being a little bit smarter and waiting for the pitches that you want to drive. It's interesting to see. I think it's made Pete really step into, I think, what the expectation for his free agency was, but going forward. So, right, there was a lot of talk about Pete Alonso not being or not necessarily performing to what he was supposedly seeking in free agency. But with these first 2 weeks of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if he had multiple offers, and for the opportunity for him to opt out or even seek the kind of contract that he'd been looking for in this offseason. He has been incredible to watch. And it is just, for somebody who truly loves baseball and all of those kinds of romanticized, behind the scenes, intangible things, he is just such an incredible representation of what it means to be a Mets fan. And it's awesome to see him have such a hot start.
And Gab, final question. You brought him up before. One of the big question marks of the team has been Brett Baty. A lot of people are saying he's going to get sent down once Jeff McNeil comes back from his injury. He's been trying for years now to stay consistent with this team. Do you think at this point he's relegated to a guy who fills in for injured regulars, or is he going to have a significant role with the Mets down the road? What should they do with him?
I've written articles about it. You know what I mean? I am a Brett Baty truther. I want him to succeed. He is such a hard-working player. He's got so many great natural abilities, and he works so hard. So for Brett Baty, things might not be connecting right now, but even in those post-game scrums with Carlos Mendoza, the manager, all they're talking about is, he's going to work through it. He's constantly working on it. Things aren't connecting right now. Maybe it's not coming into fruition. There are a lot of things that come into the game of baseball. It's extremely hard. So for him, I mean, as much as I want Brett Baty to succeed on the Mets, maybe it's not necessarily in the cards, but as the kind of saying goes, once you leave the Mets, right, you go on to win a World Series if they're not going to win it this year. But Brett Baty is the kind of player that I think, especially having he hit a triple yesterday. And for him to make that kind of connection, especially with the slump that he might be experiencing at the time, whatever's currently going on with that, I think it's more or less a consistency thing. Maybe he's not seeing pitches as well. Maybe he's nervous. It doesn't help when you're at Citi Field, your home field, and the fans are booing you. So that, I think, number one, have a huge problem with that. So all of you that have been booing Brett Baty, I have a problem with you here. But if he's not going to have that kind of breakout season with the Mets, you could only hope that he has it for a different team. But I do think that there's a spot for Brett Baty here. I think that him, especially coupled with Vientos, I don't think it's a bad matchup. I don't know if platoon third base is in the cards for the Mets. They've got tons of prospects that are coming up that, yeah, you need to water the garden a little bit with the guys you've already got. But Brett Baty's a homegrown guy as well. So for them to put the work in and to hang on to him and to really see it through with him, I think is the right thing for the Mets to do. He's just, he's got all the tools, and it's a matter of just bringing it above that triple A level to consistency in a major league park. So I do hope that, especially, they're going to face a last place team, the Minnesota Twins, this upcoming 3 game stint. I really hope that him having that confidence with making those incredible double plays in the hot corner yesterday against the A's, and as well as making that contact and getting not only right an extra base hit out of it, but doing so in with the magnifying glass on him. I hope that that kind of lights a fire in him, and I'm looking forward to see what he does next. Honestly, if it's not with the Mets, Brett Beatty's a phenomenal baseball player, and I do hope that it works out for him in Queens.
And he is a hard worker. Gab Raucci, thanks so much for coming on, and let's go Mets.
Thank you. Let's go Mets.
Coming up, Geoff Magliochetti joins me to talk about New York's other blue and orange team, the New York Knicks, as they get ready for the playoffs. Stay with us. The Knicks are headed to the NBA playoffs with their best record in 12 years. Joining me now is Geoff Magliochetti to look back on their season. Geoff, I know this is an exciting time of year for you. Thanks for coming on.
Mike, thank you for having me on. You guys do excellent work. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So the Knicks had a playoff-worthy year, but what would you say is the greatest success story to come out of this season for New York?
There are several things that really stood out to me about this Knicks team because, you know, obviously they probably didn't live up to all of their expectations. One of the things that was more disappointing was perhaps the fact they were never in true contention for one of those top 2 seeds. Got off to kind of a slow start. That opening night loss in Boston. There was a loss to Cleveland there. Never really contended for that top seed. Having said that, there were several individual cases that really stood out to me this year. I think you can continue to sing the praises of Jalen Brunson. Half of the Knicks fan experience over the past 3 years has been waiting for the other shoe to drop when it comes to Jalen Brunson. That shoe at this point probably isn't coming because Brunson has continued to flourish, continued to push forward, and even the most pessimistic Knicks fan, even the most stubborn Knicks critic has to admit that Brunson has transformed himself into a legitimate top option in this league. This season, Brunson averaged 26 points and a career-high 7.3 assists. He's the first New Yorker in the top 10 in both categories since 1963 when Richie Guerin did it. Credit to Mike Breen for that stat on the broadcast yesterday. Others that stood out to me were Josh Hart because Hart was another one who proved that he can be an indispensable piece on an NBA playoff trip because so many mock trades involving the Knicks who are depleted of assets at this point. But, this offseason, you will undoubtedly see, Metropolitan Fiction call out for, let's get Kevin Durant, let's get Giannis Antetokounmpo. You will see that a lot. And it feels like Josh Hart was involved in a lot of those hypothetical deals. But he has transformed himself into an indispensable part of a championship picture to the tune of 9 triple-doubles, which sets a Knicks single-season record, which was originally held by Walt Clyde Frazier. Anytime you're mentioning the same sentence as Clyde in a Knicks perspective, Mike, you've done something right. So that was a great thing to see. And he's also leading the league in several major hustle categories, including loose balls recovered per game. Other individual cases that stood out to me were OG Anunoby letting his offensive prowess flourish. Since March, he is averaging just under 23 points per game and has made a case, of course, for his Defensive Player of the Year candidacy, and Mitchell Robinson as well. Missed the first 58 games of the year due to ankle injuries that were lingering from last year. In that time, he kind of became, an MVP in absentia for the Knicks. I believe we discussed this before back in December, per se. The Knicks really missed him, and the Knicks missed that unique weapon, one of the few true traditional centers left in this league. Since Robinson returned in late February, the Knicks ranked 9th in defensive rating. That's actually since March. They ranked 9th in defensive rating and 6th in opposing second chance points per game. They were 19th in defensive rating prior to Robinson's return. So those are 4 individual cases that really stood out to me from this Knicks group, this team, in terms of, the greatest success.
Now, the Knicks finished the season strong in their final game against the Nets with a great come-from-behind win, but the 3 games prior were against playoff-bound teams, and they lost all 3. Should Knicks fans be worried about that?
I would say they shouldn't be, but but you have to take into account what transpired on Friday night. There was the loss. It was on Tuesday against Boston, and I smile at this a little bit because I saw some fans compare that to the Giants' famous Week 17 loss to New England Patriots in 2007 because they drew blood from the Celtics in that game. They probably should have had it too, but unfortunately, Jason Tatum and Kristaps Porzingis had other plans. But the fact that they were able to put up a very strong effort against a Celtics team that was more or less at full strength. I know Jaylen Brown has been dealing with some nagging injuries a little bit, but at the same time, this was the first time that this Knicks team has been truly at full strength all year. They had Mitchell Robinson in tow. They had these guys. They had a full contingent in the starting 5. They had, for perhaps one of the few times all year, the team they set out to have, the team they wanted. So if you ended the season on that note, I could see it be fine. Even the loss of Detroit was understandable because people are going to make a big deal going into this playoff series about the way the Pistons were physical with the Knicks, the way the Pistons kind of bullied them around a little bit. I believe the points in the paint battle in that was Cleveland had a plus 20, not Cleveland, Detroit had a plus 20 advantage in that game. But at the same time, the Knicks were missing, again, some regulars in that game. OG Anunoby did not play. Josh Hart did not play. Mitchell Robinson did not play. The fact that you had, all due respect to PJ Tucker, who has been, the quintessential teammate, really good guy on the bench. When you have a game where PJ Tucker's playing 27 minutes and Detroit can only take control in the fourth quarter, you're doing something right. You have at least some semblance of that. So you can't panic about that. Friday, however, was another story entirely. You go up against a Cleveland Cavaliers team that was missing, that was resting folks. They were resting DeAndre Hunter. They were resting Ty Jerome. They were resting all-star Donovan Mitchell. But the unfortunate fact of the matter is the Knicks blew a 23-point lead in that game. And the Knicks were shorthanded too. Karl Anthony Towns did not play in that game. Let's be fair. Let's document all the absences. But the fact that you couldn't muster a victory against a Cleveland team that was missing major contributors, not only lost that game, but blew a large lead in that process, that's concerning. That has the potential to throw a wrench in your own momentum a little bit. But it's a good test anyway. It's a great test to see where the Knicks stand at this point. It'll be great to see what they can do against a Pistons team. The Knicks, you hate to say it from a Metropolitan perspective, they're going to be a villain in this series. They're going to be playing a Detroit team that, is one of the most inspiring stories of this NBA season. 14 wins the year before. The Detroit basketball back on top in a sense. They're in Cade Cunningham turning himself into a franchise face. They're a very inspiring story, and people do not want to see them lose in a way. So the Knicks, unfortunately, are placed in the villain role in this series. It'll be a nice little test for them. It's a good test of Jalen Brunson's leadership. It's a good test to see where Karl Anthony Towns can do when the pressure's high. It's a good chance to see what this core is up to as they press forward. And, James Dolan mentioned on the Roommate show recently that he intends to keep this core for a while. But, the rumors, of course, around Giannis, around Durant, will persist. So this is going to be a great little test to see where the Knicks stand.
And the Knicks will always be our heroes. Geoff, stay right there. When we come back, we'll look ahead at what awaits them in the postseason. Stay with us. Well, the Knicks are playoff bound for the 3rd straight year, and for the 4th time in 5 years. We're back with Geoff Magliochetti to preview what they have to look forward to this postseason. Geoff, what are the Knicks going up against with the Detroit Pistons?
They're facing an overly physical group that, is armed with a sense of nothing to lose. As we discussed, Mike, the Knicks are going to be the undeniable antagonists in this series. From a broader NBA perspective, Detroit is one of the more inspiring stories of this year. The way that Cade Cunningham has come into his own as a franchise face, the way Jalen Duren has worked in the interior. This is the way Malik Beasley has done a solid job as a Death Star. This is a team that, people want to see succeed. and they're particularly dangerous at this point. They overachieved in the best sense possible because Detroit hit fast forward on its rebuild timeline. They won 14 games last season. The Knicks entered this season with a 16-game winning streak over Detroit, but the Pistons won the last three. They are going up against a team that likes to be physical, likes to push people around, and perhaps most dangerously, they have nothing to lose at this point. I like to call it 2017 Yankee syndrome in the sense that, this is a fun squad in the sense that, they know that potentially greater things are on the way. They know that they can use this to kind of play with a sense of healthy, reckless abandon. And the Knicks cannot get caught up on that. One thing that I think could really stand out in this series, the Knicks should truly go for a sweep, besides the obvious, of course. Everyone would love to see this over quickly. But the Knicks are on an interesting point on the franchise timeline. Winning in the first round is not going to impress anybody anymore. It's gotten to a point where, the year one of the Brunson era against Cleveland, that was excellent. You could say you won the Donovan Mitchell decision in the sense that you didn't trade for him. You beat them in 5 games. And it was fantastic. And it was the first playoff series win too in about a decade. So that was great. Last year, you beat Philadelphia. You beat a division rival. You go and you invade Wells Fargo Center from a fan perspective. That was excellent too. And then you constantly wonder what might have been in terms of the injuries because we never really saw that Knicks team at full strength get beaten, and what they could have done had they faced Boston or Indiana for that matter from a healthy sense. It's going to be one of the bigger ifs in New York sports history, or at least in recent memory. But this time around, winning a first round set is not going to satisfy anybody this time around. It's time for major progress. We're looking at teams. Look at the teams that have competed for an Eastern Conference final in recent years. The Knicks have not done that in over 20 years. You'd think at some point they would stumble rear backward into one of these, but they have not, unfortunately. So it's not cute or fun to win in the first round anymore, even if the Knicks, have established some sense of consistency. Over the past 2 years, they're one of only 2 teams next to the champions, Boston and Denver, to win at least one playoff round in each of the last 2 years. But again, this isn't going to impress anybody anymore. It's time for real progress. And if you could make a statement by sweeping Detroit fairly quickly, taking care of them, it would really do a lot for the franchise timeline moving forward.
And Geoff, I want to talk about Tom Thibodeau, who's been the most consistent head coach the Knicks have had since Jeff Van Gundy in the mid 90s to early 2000s. For a while, in the 2010s, it almost felt like the 1980s Yankees with the constant turnover. They had a new head coach every year or every half season. But Thibodeau is in his 5th season with the team, and this is New York's 4th postseason under his leadership, rather. How important is it to have a consistent leader to have success?
We're undoubtedly seeing that, and these players, I think, they want to work for Thibodeau a little bit. They like Tibbs. They want to work for him. There's an easygoing sense in there that these guys want to succeed for him. They want to defy the notions that his, over reliance on starters minutes, his excessive workloads. They want to defy those notions that those are harmful. I think there is a genuine sense of camaraderie against this team. It's funny you should mention that about Thibodeau. I think there is a sense of pressure on him, considering what's transpired throughout the rest of the league. The Denver Nuggets have recently fired Michael Malone, surprisingly, with 3 games left in the season. And there will be questions about Thibodeau's future, I feel, because, you look at Malone and the Knicks, it's a match made in heaven. He's a Queens native. He got his start in NBA coaching on the Knicks bench, I believe, served as an assistant next to Thibodeau, I believe, on one of Jeff Van Gundy's final staff. So I think that, there is an extra sense of pressure on Thibodeau this time around. And if you're the Knicks at this point, it might be now or never in the sense that, if you do want to succeed with this group, this is the time you would make a change like that. I'm not saying they will. I'm not even saying that's the right move because, there is a general sense of consistency. Thibodeau is not above criticism, of course. You can't just say, look where they were 5 years ago and expect Thibodeau to carry some sense of immunity. Having said that, he has put the Knicks back on the NBA map of relevancy, and there is something to look forward with this group. And I think these guys do want to play for Thibodeau, especially considering what transpired last year, the great missed opportunity. So I think that consistency is huge, and it will play a big factor in this series.
Well, hopefully they can go all the way this year. Geoff Magliochetti, thanks so much for taking the time, and let's go Knicks.
Mike, appreciate your time and insight. Thank you for having me on. Keep up the great work.
Take care. And now some of the Kean highlights you might have missed. Chris Mitchell notched 5 kills in the opening set against Marymount University in the CVC quarterfinals on Tuesday night. The junior standout went on to post a total of 25 kills, marking a new career high. Despite his dominant performance, Kean dropped the match against the Saints 3-1, bowing out of the CVC playoffs. Men's lacrosse defeated Penn College on Wednesday night in a dominating 18-8 performance. Dylan Johnson was outstanding, tallying 5 goals and 4 assists. The junior now has 56 goals and 26 assists on the season. After being named the CLC Offensive Player of the Week, the talented forward is well on his way to having the best season of his already standout collegiate career. The track and field athlete showed up for the Cougars' Distant Carnival event on Friday night. Senior mid-distance runner Corey Rodriguez had an outstanding performance, winning the 800-meter race with an impressive time of 2:07. That'll do it for this week's show. For all Kean University highlights, just head over to our website, ONNJ.com.